Once again, welcome back to the program. ਅੱਜ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਸਾਥ ਦੇਣਗੇ ਕੈਥਰੀਨ ਸੈਸ, ਇੱਕ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਲਾਇਰ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਆਏ ਬਗਾਏ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝ ਪਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਚੇਂਜਸ ਲਿਆਏ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਿਸਟਮ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਵੱਡਾ ਚੇਂਜ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਲਿਆਂਦਾ ਗਿਆ ਉਹ ਹੈ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਐਬਿਲਿਟੀ, ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਵਿਅਕਤੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਕੈਟੇਗਰੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਲੈਂਗੁਏਜ ਐਬਿਲਿਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ ਜਾਂ ਫ੍ਰੈਂਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਚੰਗੀ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਉਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਓ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਣੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਫੀਲਡਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇਹ ਲਾਗੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਦਾ ਕੀ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਪੈ ਰਿਹਾ ਤੇ ਕੀ ਇਸ ਦੀ ਰੈਮਿਫਿਕੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਨੇ। ਸਵਾਗਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕੈਥਰੀਨ ਸੈਸ ਦਾ। ਵੈਲਕਮ ਟੂ ਦ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ।
Hello.
So now that I start speaking in Punjabi, probably you understand a little bit about what I am saying.
Anji.
Thank you. Okay, so today we would like to know about the language ability tests, and also in all the categories this has been introduced. Why do you feel this has been done, and what kind of problems, challenges, or achievements the government thinks will they have by having this test introduced?
Well, the shift towards increasing language proficiency really started, I would say, back in 2002 when the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act came in, because they really increased the points that were being given for language requirements. And that was done because the empirical data shows that immigrants are better to establish more quickly when they can communicate in one of Canada's official languages.
Right.
But we weren't very proactive about that, and even though the points went up in 2002, there was subjective evidence. You'd get a letter from your employer that said, I confirm that Mr. Singh can speak English and he works in English every day, and that was the proof of what your language proficiency was.
Right.
Well, some employers had a higher threshold of what proficiency was than others, and there was also a lot of abuse and fraud that came into that.
Right.
So in 2010, we went for the skilled worker program and for the Canadian experience class, needing proof from an independent third-party language test,
Right.
the IELTS test,
Right.
the British Council test. And we no longer use the TOEFL test, and we've just recently approved for all categories the self-PIP test. And that
Yeah.
means that rather than allow the immigration officer to evaluate people's ability, and you have to remember that back then we used to call people in for interviews.
Right.
We gave them interviews, and the immigration officer made a determination, do you speak English well enough? And they allocated points as to whether they thought they had basic proficiency or moderate proficiency or fluent proficiency. It was a very, very subjective process and very unsatisfying for everybody else and time consuming. So as I said, in 2010, we put in language testing. When we first started with that, English-speaking people from native English-speaking countries were exempted. So Australia, New Zealand, United States, we didn't have to, the UK, we didn't have to put in language test results for those
Right.
people. After a while, that was changed. Everybody must put in a language test. So when I'm bringing in a professor from a university in the United Kingdom or in the United States, and I tell them they have to take a language test just like everybody else to prove their English proficiency, they're a little bit baffled by that.
Right.
But again, the bottom line is the minister wants a level playing field for everybody.
Right.
They also found that in some countries, even such as the UK, just because you're born in the UK and go to school in the UK, multiculturalism being what it is, not everybody was fluent in English language
Right.
ability or French language ability in other countries. So they just said, this is going to be a one-size-fits-all. You're
Right.
going to take a language test. In 2011, that was introduced for business immigrants. If business immigrants were going to claim the points, you needed a point score, and many business immigrants could qualify and meet the points threshold without a language test. But if you're going to claim the 10 points for language proficiency, you're going to have to back that up with an actual test showing what your results are.
Okay.
That has continued to permeate through other programs. It's in the new skilled trades class. As I said, it's in the Canadian experience class. Last year in November, it was introduced for citizenship applicants. And that's probably when the biggest hue and cry came out, other than probably 2002 when they changed the
Right.
Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. So now you have to provide tangible evidence. It's not quite the same standard as it is for a permanent resident application. You need to have proof that you were graduated from a secondary school that was completed in English,
Right.
or a regular language test, or that you have taken an approved course by the Government of Canada once you have arrived in Canada.
Right.
So those are the three sources. And a few months ago, there was a big hue and cry because there were a number of applicants from the UK who didn't have either their proof of their high school education or didn't have any of this other data, but didn't want to have to pay to take the test.
Right.
And they could communicate with the office in English to explain their circumstances, but that wasn't being accepted.
Right.
And they were saying, this just isn't fair, because clearly you can tell me, you can tell that I'm able to communicate effectively in English. And again, we're going to this system of transparency where it's what's good for one is good for all.
For all.
And you got to, if you don't have those results, then
Right.
you've got to go and take a test.
So as you said, the criteria is you ought to pass the IELTS test, and that's the criteria. But the basic idea is that you should communicate. That's what it is.
Yes.
But in this case also what we find is that people from India or Pakistan or some other South Asian countries, they can understand, or probably they many times face some problems in speaking.
Yes.
Now in that case, there is no kind of, they're also treated in the same way. Whatever their abilities or talent is, that's not counted. They ought to have that English proficiency or French proficiency.
You're going to have to make some effort, if not before you come to Canada, then certainly once you get here, to be able to speak at a certain level of proficiency in order to be able to get your citizenship. Now, the skilled worker program criteria just
Yeah.
changed on, I'm starting to mix up the dates because there's so many things that changed. I think it was April 4th. And the thresholds for what you meet to get the maximum points have gone up considerably.
Right.
You used to require a Canadian language benchmark level of 7, and that would give you fluent.
Right.
Now to get fluent proficiency, you need 9.
Wow.
It's a very, very high level. And that's because, again, Minister Kenney is very clear about saying he wants to see immigrants to succeed,
Right.
and all their objective data shows that the immigrants that succeed the best are the ones who are able to communicate effectively, and they don't want to be misleading people,
That's
because
right.
we also get that problem
Yeah.
that people come over here as engineers or doctors
then
and
say
end up
that we
driving
didn't know about
taxis
it.
and
Yeah.
they don't know about anything. So everybody's being told, if you want to come, this is the skill you're going to need, and linguistic skill is now the most important factor in the
Right.
immigration process.
That's
You
very true. But Catherine, here the question is that if they come, then only this problem will arise, because if they're not able to qualify, then of course they're not coming over here.
Not if you're sponsoring your parents and grandparents. Not everybody comes under an economic program whereby they
Right.
have to meet a language test. There are still, you could be bringing your spouse, you could bring your parents,
Right.
you could be bringing your children. There are people. I think where we see the greatest difficulty in the citizenship realm, quite frankly, is in the spouses and the parents and the grandparents,
That's
because
right.
they come here, they may stay at home, they don't go out into the workforce, they don't need to learn English or French to get by on their day-to-day basis,
Right.
but it really marginalizes them and keeps them isolated within their community, and it doesn't allow them to fully participate in Canadian society.
Right.
And Minister Kenney, or this government, is saying, we want you to participate, or we at least want you to be able to. So if you want to get your citizenship, you're going to have to be a little bit more proactive about being able to communicate with your neighbor down the street.
Thank you very much for this information.
Thank you.